Disclaimer. I am a law student, and the legal information provided is not legal advice. For that, please hire an attorney. So yeah, speaking of secondary, why don't we go ahead and get right on into our next topic of discussion. Ben Shapiro. Benny Bob Boyo. Oh, Lord. Yeah, so for people who aren't aware, we're talking about primarily the Shappy boy, yeah. We're talking about the new Supreme Court pick. I wanted to pick someone to react to who was talking about this, and Ben, I guess, seemed to be the best because he's a law boyo. He does law things. And this is actually nice because it's a video with him, but also it's hosted on the Heritage Foundation's website. This is the first time I've covered them. For those of you who don't know, Heritage Foundation, it's a super conservative nonprofit, and they do things like platform Ben Shapiro, which should tell you about basically everything that you need to know. So yeah, I figured this would be we got Amy Coney Barrett, we got Benny Boy Shapiro, and we got the Heritage Foundation all in one nice little clip. Should be a good grand time. But before we get too deep into it, I want to talk a little bit about who we're talking about. Again, kind of the same as what we did with Blair. I just kind of want to frame this by making sure that we're all clear on like who exactly the fuck it is we're talking about. I made a post on my Twitter. We'll go into the article and we'll read a little bit more, but just as a highlight, right? Supreme Court nominee Amy Barrett clerked for Scalia and has the same textualist and originalist views, which is wonderful. While teaching law, was a member of Faculty for Life, an anti-abortion group, because that's great. Criticized Chief Justice Roberts for ruling to preserve the Affordable Care Act for everything that it did, which again is great. And but hey, at least she's a woman. Slay queen. There's also like some rumors here. There's some rumors that she's also a Catholic, but I didn't want to like put that in the tweet because it's more just rumors right now. I want to find exactly because it's like this person is fucking crazy, right? It's absolutely like this pick is absolutely insane. I mean, like it's strategically great because she's basically just going to come off as like the very nice wife who has like 7 children, who will come off as just like so nice and believable. And, oh, she's a mother. She's American values. And she's going to just destroy all of our civil rights. Let's see. She's a textualist. 7th Circuit. Judge Barrett and her husband, Jesse Barrett, a former federal prosecutor, are reported to be members of a small and relatively obscure Christian group called People of Praise. The group grew out of a Catholic charismatic renewal movement that began in the late 1960s and adopted Pentecostal practices like speaking in tongues, belief in prophecy, and divine healing. We're in hell, people. Ah! Fuck. Yeah, so that's who we have right now. The couple have 7 children, all under 20, including 2 adopted from Haiti and a young son with Down syndrome. All right, I can't shit on that. That's actually pretty good. But yeah, they're a part of a cult. They're a part of a cult. It's a cult. That's what it is. They're a part of a cult, people. It's not even like, mind you, like again, like as far as like Christian denominations go, mind you, this is what I studied in undergrad. I was a religious studies major because I specifically looked at like different denominations of Christianity. Pentecostals are like the people in backwoods, like Baptist country in the South that basically if you ran into them and you were black or gay or otherwise LGBT, you probably were going to get murdered, right? Like that's who we're talking about. Predominantly, that's who we're talking about. They're the people who like will like when we say like speaking in tongues, it's literally like it looks like they're having a seizure in the middle of a church, right? Like there's like it's just absolute gibberish, it's absolute nonsense, and they pretend like it's God speaking down God's divine knowledge into their brains, I guess. But usually it's just used by like charismatic leaders as a way to be able to foster like very cult-like personalities. So that's great. I need some tea. So yeah, great person here. Wonderful. 10 out of 10. Best Supreme Court pick. Could not pick any better. I hope y'all can pick up my sarcasm. In 2006 speech to Notre Dame graduates, she spoke of law as a higher calling. If you can keep in mind that your fundamental purpose in life is not to be a lawyer, but to know, love, and serve God, you truly will be a different kind of lawyer. So yeah, all right, we're working with nutcase, which is great, which is just great. I don't know much about this, but interesting context. But yeah, again, don't give me like a paragraph and at me. All right, if you do, I will ban you. But I mean, it seems interesting. It's not related necessarily. Quote from another article. As Barrett spoke with her 7 children, she showed how challenging it would be for Democrats to vilify her as a frightening figure who would join the court's conservative majority in rolling back abortion rights and stripping Americans of their healthcare protections. All right, so that's what we're talking about, right? So basically what we're talking about is someone who's absolutely fucking off her mind, will try her best to take away abortion rights, try the best to take away healthcare rights, and basically will do so with a smile, and everyone's going to be like, oh, well, at least she's a super kind woman mother, slay queen, another woman in the Supreme Court, yes. And that's who we're working with. So, with that context, what does Benny Boy Ben Shapiro and Amy Swearer? I don't know how to pronounce her name. Let's see what they have to say.
We are joined on the line by Amy Swearer. She's a legal fellow at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. She's here to talk about President Trump's...
So in case you didn't catch that, it's a legal a legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, which is already as established. I mean, like the kind of people who would promote Ben Shapiro, if that doesn't signal it to you, I mean, like it's a super fucking conservative, far right group, right? Like that's what they are. So legal, like we're talking about like two super fucking conservative people, right? You can do with that what you wish.
Probable pick of a Supreme Court justice over the weekend. Amy, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So it seems like the two most talked about possibilities for Trump's Supreme Court pick are Amy Coney Barrett of the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals and Barbara Legault of the 11th.
I know it's a risk. I'll turn it back if Ben is too fast. I can be like that sometimes. We'll see how it goes.
The Circuit Court of Appeals. Let's go through each of these possible nominees in turn. So Coney Barrett had been widely suspected to be in sort of the top 2 for the seat that ended up going to Justice Kavanaugh. And now she is, suspected to be among the top possibilities.
I mean, listen, I can process it fast enough. I'm just used to it. Y'all need to catch up. Y'all need to catch up, damn it.
He's here. It seems like she hasn't been on the court that long. It's not like she has a huge, long judicial record. She taught at University of Notre Dame. She wrote a couple of pieces that got some circulation, particularly one about originalism and precedent under Justice Scalia's jurisprudence. What do you make of the possibility of her nomination? How solid should conservatives feel about her nomination?
I didn't actually realize that. I mean, like, obviously I looked into, like, the most damning parts of her background, but I didn't realize that also she hasn't really been, like, practicing for all that long. Also interesting. Someone who doesn't really have all that much experience. Because that made this so much better. Thank you, Ben. You're making the arguments for me. Making them for me. We're all gonna die.
So I think there's a reason that her name came up for the position that Brett Kavanaugh ultimately got.
It's because she's a mother of 7 who looks nice, who will turn over Roe v. Wade and Obamacare. That's the reason. Like that's the reason. All right, let's not mince meat. Now maybe she just kind of acknowledges that. I don't know. I want to see the argument.
And that is because she does have, even with a relative lack of history on the bench, she does have a long-standing history. In many respects, it almost feels as though she has been created in a lab for this moment. So she, as you said, she went to Notre Dame Law School. Then after that, she had some very high-profile clerkships, one on the D.C. Circuit, and then one as a clerk for the late, great Justice Scalia, who, again, is not exactly...
Oh yeah. I mean, we talked about this earlier. Yeah, clerk for Justice Scalia, because Scalia was the greatest, was the greatest justice on the court, right? Mind you, there's actually a really good book, sort of about Scalia. It's called Storming the Court. I actually read it for it was right before I started law school. It talks about like a case that Scalia heard, and basically like the TLDR is that like Scalia, like there's a pretty wide theory that like Scalia, and the big reason why people will criticize him is that like usually he will point to originalism as like his core tenet of interpretive method, right? The reason being that he said, well, I mean, like, the way that most people who are proponents of originalism will frame it will usually say something to the effect of, oh, well, we want to make sure that the intention of the founders are maintained, whatever they wrote down and whatever it meant at the time, or was understood by the common person at the time, some variation of interpretation there, variation in theory there. That's what we should try to implement nowadays to the best of our ability, even if it means so far as going back and pulling out a dictionary that existed back in like the late 1700s to see what a specific word meant back then. I'm not lying. People will actually do this. Like I'm not shitting you when I say that. Like that's actually happened for a lot of Supreme Court cases. And that's basically the idea. It's just like some kind of vague appeal to authority as like the founders as these all-knowing, all-omnipotent people who definitely accounted for every single nuance that would evolve throughout history. We should definitely just completely adhere to it unchangingly. Or I guess otherwise try to get an amendment passed, because, we're definitely able to pass a constitutional amendment with the way that the Supreme Court is nowadays, right? That's also kind of like another fundamental tenet of originalism is that like, okay, well, if you don't like the way that the Constitution is, just change it, forehead, just pass an amendment, forehead. You should be able to just go and convince everyone else that we need an amendment, because everyone will definitely agree with you. There's not some people who already benefit from the status quo who want to keep the things the way that they are, forehead. So just go change it, forehead. Yeah. So, I mean, like, to me, like, if we're criticizing, like, the best faith interpretation of originalism, that's probably it, is that, like, there's this fundamental understanding that if we don't like the way that the Constitution is, or it was understood to be, we could pass an amendment to change it, or pass laws otherwise to meet the needs that we need to. That, I guess that would be, like, their response to, like, more, like, progressive or, like, activist interpretations of the Constitution, right? To push, like, progressive causes, right? Originalists would say, don't try to make the Constitution do what it wasn't originally intended to do, pass laws to do what you want to do, right? But the problem is, like, they never, the founders never predicted that we would have as much polarization as we do today, to the point where we basically can't even pass a bill, let alone a fucking constitutional amendment. So that's, like, the good faith interpretation of originalism. Where I was going originally was the fact that, like, for the most part, people who are more, like, it's always going to be people who are more conservative who use this, and generally speaking, like, they only use it when it's suitable to their goals. Like, in the book that I read, Storming the Court, like, it was pretty clear that, like, Justice Scalia, in the case that I think that they were talking about, like, Haitian refugees, in the case that they were talking about, like, it was a pretty clear, plain language interpretation of the law that was being discussed that would have led to the finding, like, that would have led to a ruling that the plaintiffs wanted. And Scalia just didn't go with it, because it was the more progressive option. Just didn't. And so the inference from there, if you want, again, like, we're speculating, right? But my personal hot take opinion is that, like, most people who apply originalist interpretations usually only do so when it means that they're able to justify pretty conservative worldviews, because, like, that's mainly what the founders had, at least when we're looking at it through, like, a 21st century lens, right? Like, most of the views that they held back then would be, like, broadly speaking, pretty conservative nowadays. I mean, like, we're talking about a bunch of people who, like, owned black people. Not, I mean, like, yeah, sure, progressive for their times in a lot of ways, but not exactly in 21st century sense. So yeah, like, the TLDR, originalist interpretations, or like studying under Scalia and having those same views, not exactly the greatest. I wanted to go into, like, a deep dive. Hey, I'm able to use my education for something. Let's go on.
Known for taking on clerks who are, not well qualified. And then after that, she spent, I believe, something like 15 years as a law professor, did a little bit in private practice, but mostly as a law professor, and now has been on the court for roughly 3 years in the Seventh Circuit. And in that time, both before being on the court and then now on the court, she has had the opportunity in several pretty high-profile cases to show whether her judicial philosophy now on the court was consistent with sort of how she...
So this is just meandering. I mean, like, this doesn't necessarily make her any more qualified than anyone else. In fact, she's just kind of covering for the fact that she doesn't actually have any practical experience, or, like, very little. Like, she just, again, she was picked because she's a woman who everyone will like probably aesthetically because she's a woman, slay queen with 7 kids, God bless her soul, who will roll back abortion rights and Obamacare. That's it.
She preached as a law professor, and it turns out that, yes, she has on the court practiced exactly what she has preached, was her judicial philosophy, looking very much like an originalist, someone who understands the proper role of the judiciary, and is not going to be an
proper role. Again, like, originalism is just a theory, right? Like, it's not like there's an objectively correct way to interpret the Constitution, right? Like, different interpretations are going to have different weights ascribed to them. When you hear someone say that there's a correct way to interpret something, it's kind of oxymoronic, because like interpretation is literally like by virtue of its like by virtue of the word itself, like subjective, right? Like an interpretation is purely based on like what you are able to understand from a writing or from whatever it is you're interpreting, based on like whatever context you are bringing to it, right? To say like objectively interpret something or correctly interpret something is just kind of like inherently oxymoronic. Which isn't necessarily surprising for someone who's clerking at the Heritage Foundation, but, what do you do?
Activist who imposes, regardless of what some of the pushback has been, she's a handmaid's tale, she'll impose Catholicism on the court. That is in no way, shape, or form what we have actually seen from her.
So, Amy, one of the things that's been difficult for conservatives is that the way the judicial process works right now is the more of a black box you are judicially, the more of a chance you have of getting through the Senate. This is one of the reasons I objected to John Roberts when he was nominated for Chief Justice, was because I didn't see anything in his record that made me think that he was going to stand up tall when the pressure was on, which is...
He's literally arguing against... Wait, hold on. The more of a black box you are, he's literally arguing against, like, partisanship. He's literally saying, oh, yeah, no, we want people who are partisan because they'll stand up for the important issues, right? Because they'll definitely vote the way that we want them to when we put them in. Mind you, and I'm going to say something here, and maybe I'll get some pushback on it, and maybe I won't, but this is kind of like, I don't know, I do genuinely think, like, this is my genuine opinion, all right? The judiciary was originally intended, if we want to be like super originalist with the Constitution, the judiciary was intended to be a nonpartisan as nonpartisan as possible, right? Like that's what it was meant to do, right? It was intended to be nonpartisan. That's the reason why we originally had lifetime, or we still do have lifetime appointments, right? Because we weren't worried about putting someone partisan into there to like throw off the proportion of the court for like the rest of their lives, right? We had a basic assumption that when we appointed the Supreme Court justice, that they weren't going to go in and argue for a partisan side, that they were going to use their expertise and apply their expertise to just come to the best legal decisions possible. That was the assumption that we found. That was an assumption that was baked into the Constitution. So we're doing real originalism, right? And actually, I think that this is actually like pointing, like, oh my God, hold on. Well, I didn't actually realize this until I started making this argument, or until I was like halfway through this argument. Literally, they are simultaneously like advocating for originalism to the extent that it helps them, because they know that in like most ways it will be able to advocate like more like conservative interpretations of the Constitution. But they're also blatantly ignoring the most originalist interpretation of the Constitution possible, which is that you're not supposed to have partisan people in the Supreme Court. You're not. It's explicitly against what the Founding Fathers wanted in the Supreme Court. It's explicitly against what they wanted. That's why we have lifetime appointments. Because we weren't worried about them being partisan, because they weren't supposed to be partisan. They are explicitly going against originalism when it benefits them. And that's the reason why I don't think that any actual originalist, I don't think that any actual originalist acts in good faith. Or I think it's very hard to find them, right? Because this is like a cheap example where they literally just use an appeal to originalism as like an appeal to conservative authority, but then when it happens to cut against them, they just ignore it. They just ignore it. Ben, you went to Harvard! I was talking to a friend the other day. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but like they're pretty much like they're of the opinion, because they know a lot of people who are from like Ivy League schools. They're of the opinion that most people, especially like cis white guys, who are from like pretty wealthy backgrounds and families, most of them who get into like Harvard or Yale or like the super top best law schools, usually a lot of them just like fail up, because then when they actually try applying to like real life jobs out of law school, they can't find any, because actually their writing and like rhetoric skills are like worse than most other schools. Like usually where you want to aim for, like some of the best schools to hire out of are like NYU, Georgetown is pretty good. Like usually like the best law school you want to ignore because you're just paying for the name of degree when you go there, right? And it's kind of showing right now. I think Ben likes to throw around his Ivy League education, even though it seems like he's just kind of ignoring actual originalist interpretation of the Constitution here. I don't know. Just my thought.
Is part of the job. There's a lot of pressure as a Supreme Court justice. We've seen Republicans hit on only about 50% of other nominations. It's too early to really tell with either Gorsuch or with Kavanaugh, although Gorsuch was good until he wasn't in that Civil Rights Act case, and Kavanaugh really...
Gorsuch was good until he was in that Civil Rights case. Holy shit, be salty. Be salty, Ben. Be salty that he ruled on trans rights. Be fucking salty. Holy shit. You know, it's interesting because, like, first and foremost, if we want to keep talking about Scalia, I love pointing out originalist, hypocrisy, right? Because actually... Gorsuch is probably, in that case, the only example of, like, a truly good faith originalist, right? Because, like, at least if we're looking at it through, like, Scalia's lens, he always started at first with, like, the plain language of a text, right? You always start with the plain language, and if there is a reasonable inference, if there is, like, a clear meaning of the law to draw from a plain reading of the law, full stop. Full stop. Full stop. And that's what he did in that case. We're talking about, oh... Damn it, the trans rights case. The name is escaping me right now. Chat, help me out. But basically, in the case, it's looking at what the meaning of, like, on the basis of sex or discrimination on the basis of sex means. And it's basically the idea, right? And the argument that the plaintiffs made was that anytime that someone would discriminate against a trans person, they are inherently taking sex into account. Because by virtue of the fact that they're, like, in order to discriminate against a trans person, they have to conceive, like, you have to be able to conceive of their gender as related to their sex. It's the same reason that you would have to conceive of sex if you're discriminating against someone on the basis of their sexuality, because you would be discriminating against them on the basis that their sexuality differs from that one would be normally expected of a person of a sex or a gender, right? And it's the same kind of idea with trans people, right? You're discriminating against them on the basis that their gender does not align with their sex. You have to account for sex if you're discriminating against a trans person. It's literally impossible not to. And so, like, any plain reading of the law would lead any actual, like, originalist to interpret the law the way that he did. And Ben is just upset because he actually followed, like, decent, like, plain reading originalist interpretive methods. And didn't rule on partisan lines. Like, that's why he's fucking upset. Again, it's just kind of like showing his hypocrisy, but you know, it's just kind of interesting, Ben. It's just kind of interesting how on one hand you really like originalism, except when you don't, when it goes against your action and when it goes against your partisan values. What the fuck? We don't let women vote. Why are we letting them into court? Me and a true originalist. True. Damn, this is fun. I'm having a good time, fam.
You know, has been fine so far, but he hasn't really been put to a serious test. So what is the guarantee? Have you seen any difficult cases that she's taken on where she's received any sort of public blowback?
Well, if you mean public blowback from the right, not so much, as there has been public blowback from the left, especially in a Second Amendment case where she issued a phenomenal dissent in that case that relied heavily, and I would say properly, on the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment, very much an originalist, textualist understanding. You know, in the left.
Again, I love how they're like, oh, she's such a good originalist. Oh, she's such a good textualist in the ways where it benefits them, right? Like, again, like, this is the problem I see with originalism, is that they apply that interpretation so inconsistently and only to the way that that benefits them. That's the issue with it. Oh yeah, Bostic v. Clayton County. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, Bostic v. Clayton County says trans rights. Gorsuch says trans rights. Amazing. But yeah, that's the thing about it, is that, like, they care about, and like, when they say they care about originalist interpretations of the Constitution, they mean that they care that their opinions are platformed, or that their partisan opinions are supported by the Constitution, or like the way that the Constitution was originally written, right? Because if the founders didn't support what they wanted to do, well, we just ignore that. That's oh shush. We don't talk about that part out loud. Hey Mo, what's happening?
Came out and essentially said, oh, you know, look at her dissent. She would give AR-15s to the Boston bombers while they're still in prison, which is not at all what happened in that case. But, you know, it was a phenomenal dissent that I think really stands out. And then, you know, on the other side, she has had some criticism. There was a particular case out of Chicago dealing with sidewalk counselors outside of abortion clinics. I think the important thing there is that this actually shows that she understands her proper role as a judge. So she essentially upheld that statute, but she did so saying, you know, look, I'm an appellate court judge. There is a case directly on point. My job is to apply that case. You know, and that doesn't necessarily say what she would do when she gets to the Supreme Court. And I think, you know, on that issue of abortion,
wait. I have to apply that case. Hold on. She did so, I need to listen again. This is about pro-life.
Sidewalk counselors outside of abortion clinics. I think the important thing there is that this actually shows that she understands her proper role as a judge. So she...
Okay, so on sidewalk counselors outside of abortion clinics.
essentially upheld that statute, but she did so saying,
what was the statute about?
I think the important thing there is that this actually shows that she understands her proper role as AR-15s to the Boston bombers while they're still in prison, which is not at all what happened in that case, but it was a phenomenal dissent that I think really stands out. And then on the other side, she has had some criticism. There was a particular case out of Chicago dealing with sidewalk counselors outside of abortion clinics. But I think the important thing there is that this actually shows that she understands her proper role as a judge. So she essentially upheld that statute, but she did so saying, look, I'm an appellate court judge. There is a case directly on point. My job is to apply that case. And that doesn't necessarily say what she...
If someone can give me a source or a link to that, I would really like to see it. But they don't say what she said about it. She just said that she dissented on the case. She didn't actually say what the outcome of the case was.
Would do when she gets to the Supreme Court. And I think, on that issue of abortion, there have been a plethora of other both cases and then her...
Also, let's be clear. This is just signaling. Like they aren't saying it explicitly, but based on her history, we can reasonably deduce that she's basically saying she will overturn abortion when she gets to the Supreme Court. That's what she's saying right now. She's literally just saying, oh, well, has she, the question from Ben is, hey, has she stood up for conservative values? She's saying, well, I mean, we know that based on the way that she is, that if she were to get to the Supreme Court, she would overturn Roe v. Wade. That's what this interaction is. That's what it is. Let's be clear about it.
Her own legal writings that indicate, should she have the chance to look at that precedent may not be safe. But, again, she's an appellate court judge. Her job in that moment was not to impose her personal opinion on it. It was to uphold the Supreme Court precedent. So, I think that was a little bit of unfair criticism in that moment. But I think, again, you've seen far more criticism of her from the left for completely invalid reasons that would actually make conservative.
Completely invalid reasons. Yes, oh God, let's go back. Yeah, the fact that she's shares the same views as Scalia, which we've already talked about at length, all right. The fact that she was a member of faculty for life, the fact that she wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. I mean, I guess that all these reasons are reasons that they're going to be again, these are all reasons that conservatives would fucking love her, right? Or the fact that she likely belongs to a crazy fucking Pentecostal cult. All fucking great reasons, yeah. No, these people just want to take away abortion rights and to take away healthcare. That's what they want to do. They want you to die. Make no mistake about it. And she's like, yeah, the left is just being completely unreasonable and criticizing her. The left is being super, super unreasonable and making these criticisms against her. Yeah, people don't deserve healthcare. Women don't deserve bodily autonomy. Are you kidding me? We should let the government make rules about what women should do with their bodies. Because that makes sense.
Want to stand up and say, yeah, you know what? She is a good judge. She has made enemies of the right people, if you will.
We're speaking to Amy Swearer, legal fellow at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. So the other person who is widely perceived...
Okay, I don't want to talk about the other people because I think this was back before... my understanding is that she's the main candidate or she's the main person for consideration. So I don't care about talking about the other people. I just mainly want to talk about Amy Coney Barrett. And actually, this was amazing because this whole discussion just kind of demonstrated that this actually got into a really cool discussion of how conservatives will make this vague appeal to originalism. They'll see that as a fundamental quality that's so necessary for Supreme Court justices that it's this thing that if you got it, that means you're gonna be a great goddamn justice because you're gonna uphold the Constitution, heavy quotations. Except the thing is, right, what they normally mean when they say that they want someone who's going to uphold the Constitution and make originalist interpretations is that they want people to make conservative interpretations. They want partisan interpretations because, none of these people, Ben Shapiro and the person he was fucking talking to, completely ignored the fact that the Founding Fathers literally did not want partisan politics in the Supreme Court. They didn't. That's as originalist as you can get. That is the basic foundational principle that is baked into our Constitution. That's as originalist as they can get. But they just ignore it. They're oh no, we really want someone with partisan politics because they'll stand up for what they believe. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't. They say that they do. They say that they do. But only to the extent that it supports their personal positions, right? Let's be clear about that, all right? Don't make any mistake about it. When anyone tells you that they support, that they, believe in the Constitution, it's about as much as when people say that they believe in the Bible, right? It's not that they believe in the Bible. They believe in the few passages that actually support their worldview, all right? If people did, then holy shit. I mean, I could have a whole conversation about the Bible, right? And I'm Christian, right? But the point here is, it's just really interesting how these people can use this kind of language to try and basically virtue signal, oh, all I want is for the Constitution to be upheld. I just want American values to be upheld. I just really care about America. But they don't. They don't. They care about pushing their own partisan worldview. And in this case, their worldview is take away abortion rights and take away healthcare. At least with this person. And probably other pretty shitty stuff. I don't know. Bostic is probably like also on the chopping block, to be pretty frank. Not as likely. I think that abortion is probably much more likely, and Obamacare is a lot more likely. But if she's on the Supreme Court, fucking anything is possible. Yeah, I don't know. We're in hell. Yeah.